Potato, or should I say this week it's mother flippin' Idaho time. That's right, we're venturing to one of the more agrarian states this week and taking a look at some of the weirder folklore and urban legends that it has to offer. Now, Idaho isn't called the Gem State for nothing. This place has an abundance of folklore, from creatures that live in the mountains to some at the bottoms of lake. Nowhere appears to be safe here, so strap in and grab your favorite golden spud because we're diving headfirst into Idaho's myths and legends today. Number 1 is the Owyhee Mountain Dwarves. So the Shoshone natives apparently ran into a race of little people named the Nimmerigger. Non-natives heard of these tales from the Shoshone natives when they began to hear singing voices echoing throughout the mountains. At first they thought this could be the voices of lost coal miners coming from caves. Also at night, when they'd be wandering around the lands, they'd sometimes see lights at the top of mountains, which disappeared when they got close. And they also found teeny tiny little footprints at the tops of mountains sometimes. According to Shoshone natives, these mountain dwarves used bows to hunt whose arrows were laced with poisons, and they were so ruthless that they would kill their own if their fellow dwarves weren't productive members of the tribe. They were also known to hunt and eat people that ventured too far into their territory. Supposedly, these 2-foot-tall folk lived all over the Owyhee Mountain Range and in caves along the range. And if you run into one, not only will they stand out because of their size, but because they're typically naked, if not draped in the hide of an elk, which is their favorite food. They also apparently have long tails, which they keep wrapped around their body. Number 2 is the Old Idaho Penitentiary. The Old Idaho Penitentiary was built in 1870 and was operational for 101 years, during which it has had more than 13,000 inmates living in it. During this time, Idaho was apparently transitioning out of its Wild West days and therefore had its fair share of scandals take place on the inside, with at least 130 cited deaths that supposedly still haunt it today. If you're bold enough, you can even still tour the penitentiary yourself. Prisoners lived in horrible conditions here. The sandstone that the prison was built out of trapped heat in the intense Boise summers and held on to cold in the winters. And there wasn't plumbing until the 1920s that led to illness and the spread of disease. In 1971 and 1973, before the prison was closed, riots broke out because of the poor conditions and the poor treatment. And you can actually still see evidence from the fires and smoke of those riots if you pay a visit. The prison also held some fairly famous, notorious inmates. Raymond Allen Snowden is one of them, and he was once referred to as Idaho's Jack the Ripper. Raymond was known to have murdered 3 women before his hanging at the prison, and there was also Harry Orchard, who was famous for the murder of the then governor, Frank Stoneberg, and about 16 others. He was also a gambler, a womanizer, and a known alcoholic. Orchard lived 45 years in the prison, too, so he certainly may have left his mark there. According to folks that enter the penitentiary looking for evidence that the old residents left behind, there are plenty of footsteps and voices to be heard, and occasionally a rush of cool air if you're lucky. Even some of the more recently incarcerated folks reported that they were haunted in their cells while they were staying there. Supposedly, the building where Snowden was housed is particularly haunted, with some saying that it's actually him haunting it, and that he never really left. At number 3, we have Sharlie, the Payette Lake monster. So we're taking a brief break from the more scary folklore here, and we're going to talk about something named Sharlie, which therefore can't be that scary. Sharlie is basically Idaho's Loch Ness monster. It can be found in Payette Lake near McCall, Idaho. And this story also somewhat predates Europeans because supposedly the natives in the region believed of an evil spirit living in the lake, so maybe this lends some credence to the tale. In a Westerner sense, the first tales of Sharlie began in the 1920s. Some workers were cutting log ties near Payette Lake when they saw a log floating down a lake, they thought, except it wasn't a log because it began to move around. Later, in 1944, apparently several people reported to see a 30 to 35 foot long creature swimming in the lake that supposedly had a dinosaur's head. A couple of years later, a large group saw this creature again and said that whatever it was diving down into the water over and over. And finally, the creature got its name in 1954 when a radio show held a contest to name the creature. It was named after a popular catchphrase in an old-time radio show, and hence got its name, Sharlie. Since the apparently very active period for Sharlie in the 1940s, there have been multiple sightings, with the most recent sighting of Sharlie I could find being in 1997. So who knows, maybe Sharlie is still swimming around out there. What I do know is that, like the Mothman of West Virginia, Macau has latched onto Sharlie, and if you're ever in the area, you'll find plenty of Sharlie-themed souvenirs, toys, and businesses in the area. So stop by, have a good time. Number 4 is Idaho's Sprit Lake. Now, if you look up Sprit Lake, you'd really never guess that spooky stuff is going on in the area. The community around this lake is really positive, and it promotes recreation on the lake. The lake itself, however, supposedly has a troubled past and future that you may want to be wary of before you take a dip. The name of this lake comes from a Native American legend, where an Indian chief's daughter and a young man eloped to the dismay of the father, and when the chief tried to separate them, they jumped into Sprit Lake together, never to be seen again. There's also a tale of a canoeing accident where 7 native men fell in and their bodies were never recovered from the lake. These accidents were attributed to gods and evil spirits. Back when these incidents occur, the name of the lake was Tessamini, or Lake of Spirits. Supposedly, it was Tessamini, which is a god of the lake, that carried these bodies away, giving Sprit Lake its name. Supposedly, as a result of these tragedies, in the spring when the ice is melting off of the lake, you can hear an odd groaning or moaning sound in the area. Some say this sound is just the ice melting, but others claim it's the sound of the native lovers and the men in that canoe screaming and seeking release from the Lake of Spirits. At number 5, we have the Haunted Mansions in Albion. Albion is a tiny town, so you really might miss it. Only 267 people live there, and there are prisons on this list that have more ghosts than this whole town probably could produce. The prisons might also have been bigger, as this town has only a little surface area of 0.47 square miles. Now, don't let this small size deceive you though. Apparently at night, things get pretty wild around here, and you can attribute a lot of this to the Albion State Normal School. This school was constructed in the 1800s, and it was a teaching college. It operated until 1951, and it was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1981. The buildings on this campus are pretty unassuming during the day, but at night it's another story that has apparently attracted a lot of attention to Albion, and some of the most famous ghost hunters in the nation have even come here. People who have visited this campus at night have reported rapid footsteps running throughout the buildings, disembodied voices speaking in their ears, and have even reported smelling, tasting, and feeling things. They aren't friendly ghosts either, as one visitor, at least, has reported being thrown into a wall by apparently an apparition he could not see. Funny enough, this campus is mostly used as a retreat center where people often visit a large ex-resident hall that has a bunch of bedrooms and on-site activities. In October, though, this all changes. They really dress the buildings up and turn the State Normal School into a huge haunted attraction. It's not all fun and games, though. Apparently some of the actors that work there have experiences of their own with ghosts. They'll perhaps see someone else they think is a dressed-up actor walking around when they go to say hello, and the apparition will disappear in front of them. They also report to see orbs and shadowy figures lingering in the darkness. So sure, this sounds like an incredible haunted attraction, but just keep in mind, it's one where you might actually see a real ghost. Thank you all for coming with me to the gem state today. Looks like neither the dwarves or the spirits got me this time, but I did get a little chubby from all of those russet potatoes I brought home. If you like this video, go ahead and scream to people from the top of the mountain to like and subscribe to this channel. Also, go ahead and hit that alert button so that you're told when my next video drops on the state of Illinois. If nothing else, if you're working at the Albion Haunted Attraction and you see a new actor walking around the room you're in, maybe think once or twice before you go and say hello. But most importantly, whether you're spending the night in an old prison, running from killer dwarves, or taking a dive in Sprit Lake, don't you ever forget, it's always story time.